Hi and Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Afika Shafrini binti Zamri, and throughout this study I was supervised by Dr. Nur Aziza binti Ismail. Welcome to my presentation to my panel and all viewers. So today I'm going to present about my Viva entitled Morphological Characterization of Agaricus section Xanthodermatei at Uitm Pahang. So let's get started with introduction. Agaricus section Xanthodermatei was created by Singer 1948 to include a distinctive group of species sharing characters with the type of species. This species is called yellow stainer, as when the cap and stem base was scraped, it turned into striking chrome yellow and emit a phenolic odor. Young caps have a square loop, while elder caps have a flattened top, almost vertical side. The gills start out white, then pink, and mature gills are brown. There are three problems that inspire me to do this research. Firstly, many Agaricus species has been discovered in Malaysia, but there is limited research carried out for the non-edible Agaricus species, which is in the section of Xanthodermatei. Second, the extensive study has been done in other countries such as in Tibet, China, and even Thailand, but never in Malaysia. And lastly, most reports on macrofungi in Malaysia focus more on macromorphological characteristic for species identification without detail of micromorphological characteristic. Next is the significance of the study. This study provides information on the morphological characterization of Agaricus section Xanthodermatei. Second, this study beneficial to mushroom foragers to distinguish between edible and non-edible mushroom. Lastly, this study is beneficial for future reference, as in Malaysia there is a lack of study on this non-edible mushroom species. There are three objectives of this study. Firstly, is to identify the Agaricus section Xanthodermatei species at Uitm Pahang. Next, to observe the morphological characteristic of Agaricus section Xanthodermatei species by using light microscope and scanning electron microscope. And lastly, to determine the main characteristic of Agaricus species collected. Literature reviews cover on several aspects. The characteristic that differ the Agaricus species is the macromorphology, which is their pilus, lamella, and style. Meanwhile, for their micromorphology is their spore size and basidia. Next is methodology. There are a few steps when it comes to experimenting. First, 5 sampling sites was selected based on the presence of the species. This sampling has been done during the rainy season, which is during the month of October to December 2022. The specimens were kept in paper bag and correctly labeled with important information such as location, habitat, and date of collection. The observations were made on the site. The macromorphological structure such as the shape and the color of pilus, lamellas, type, and order were observed and recorded. After that, specimens were brought to the laboratory for future microscopic observation using light microscope and scanning electron microscope. Result and discussion. The distribution of Agaricus species at Uitm Jengka, specifically at Merempu Halangan, Dataran Integrasi, Student Affair Building, Hilltop, and Faculty of Applied Science, Wood and Technology. The first one is Agaricus endocenthes. The cap was convex or plano-convex with a straight margin. The pilus was covered with fibrous scale, pale to greenish-brown in color. The lamella were free, noticeable crowded lamellula. The lamella of young specimen is pale pink but turn brown in older specimens. The annulus was fragile and easily ruptured. The style was thick, membranous, and brownish. Phenolic odor was recorded. Basidiospore is elongated, ellipsoid, mostly in cylindrical shape, thick while hyaline, apiculate spore, clavate basidia, and long cylindrical hyphae found in almost every field. Agaricus endocenthes is a tropical species that was discovered in Sri Lanka. Agaricus molleri is frequently confused with Agaricus endocenthes. It is noted that the two species are morphologically indistinguishable. Para 2030 synonymous Agaricus totalis with Agaricus endocenthes after re-examined both halotype with the extensive sample. Next is Agaricus microvolvatus. The spore cup was white, hemispherical to parabolic, often truncated at the center, then plano-convex. Lamella were free, crowded with intercalated lamellula, whitish at first, then pink, and finally dark brown. The annulus is superior, membranous, thick, and well-delimited margin. Basidiospore is elongated ellipsoid, mostly in cylindrical shape, thick or hyaline apiculate spore, cylindrical basidia, and long cylindrical hyphae found. This species was suspected as Agaricus microvolvatus as it shared the same characteristic by a dark color pilus. Previously, the specimen were recovered from Africa. In a view of morphologically, Agaricus microvulvatus and Agaricus endozanthus are slightly similar in pilus, color, and type of polyplus obstruction. However, they differ in the color of stipe surface, where Agaricus microvulvatus had a white stipe, whereas Agaricus endozanthus had a dicus stipe. Both species had a bulbous base, but the base of Agaricus microvulvatus was more distinct and vulva-like. This Agaricus species could not be identified due to some factors. The sporocarp was convex or plano-convex, light brown background with dark brown scales, typically 3 to 4 cm width. The umbo was dark brown. The lamella were free, crowded, and brown in color. The stipe was thick, creamy, white colored, smooth surface, and covered with small fibrillus. The annulus was fragile and easily ruptured. The order was Phenolips. Spores are in cylindrical shape, thick wall hyaline apiculate. Basidia presents and long cylindrical hyphae found in almost every field. Agaricus species 1 was predicted as Agaricus grandomyces in section Hondenses due to several unique features that should match with Agaricus grandomyces. Most species from this section Hondenses have curved brown to yellowish brown squamulus on the pilus. Agaricus grandomyces shares the same type characteristic as Agaricus species 1. However, this species was tested positive with 5% KOH, forming yellow discoloration on the pilus, and the stipe turned yellow when it kite. In contrast, Agaricus grandomyces does not react with KOH. Currently, this species is identified as Agaricus species 1 until molecular identification reveals the actual nomenclature for this species. Next, this species also couldn't be identified. The sporocarp was flat, umbilicate with pale yellow background and brown scales. Immature basidioscarp was convex. The lamella were crowded, free, pink at first and later become dark brown. The stipe was smooth, short and stout with the base of stipe slightly enlarged. The annulus on the stipe was fragile and easily ruptured. The order was Phenolip. Basidiospores are elongated, ellipsoid, mostly in cylindrical shape, thick walled, hyaline, apiculate spore. Four-steric with developing spores on top of basidium and long cylindrical hyphae found almost in every field. All the three main characteristics of this species match with those species in the section Xanthodermatei. Agaricus species 2 share the same characteristic as Agaricus luteofibrillus in the section of Minorus, with regards to the shape of the pilus and yellowish white pilus surface covered with brownish orange squamulus or triangular scales. Furthermore, its type was short and thick, which differed from other collected species in the section Xanthodermatei, which were elongated and bulbous based. However, this species was tested positive for KOH reaction. Therefore, the species was definitely one of the members in the section Xanthodermatei. Lastly, this species is the longest species found. The sporocarp was convex or plano-convex. It had a black umber and dark scales. The lamella were free, crowded, and brown in color. The stipe was slender, dark brown, and had a fragile annulus. Basidiospores were elongated, ellipsoid, mostly in cylindrical shape, thick-walled, hyaline, apiculate spores. Broadly cylindrical cleaved basidia found with the three sterigma with developing spores on top of it. Species 3 resemble Agaricus endozanthus or Agaricus rotalis with regard to the pattern and color of the pilus. However, a few characteristics of this species differ from Agaricus endozanthus or Agaricus rotalis. Firstly, the species had an elongated and slender stipe compared to Agaricus endozanthus or Agaricus rotalis, which was short and stunted. The stipe was also reddish-brown in color. The margin of the pilus was firmer and did not easily crack. The annulus was also thinner and easier to rupture. In conclusion, a total of 5 Agaricus section Xanthodermatei species were collected at Uitm Pahang from 5 different locations. Based on the results, only 2 species can be identified to the species level. Meanwhile, the remaining 3 species couldn't be distinguished at the genus level. However, these species are confirmed as Agaricus section Xanthodermatei based on their macro and micro morphological characteristics. The results show that despite these species belong to the same section, they were unique from one another in terms of their features. The limitation that can be addressed in this study is the lack of local reference Most references used in this study were from temperate and other tropical countries such as Thailand, which may have differed slightly from the local specimens. Other than that, the number of specimens were collected during this study were extremely low, and the specimens were also collected only one time. The amount of rain received while collecting the specimen was less than anticipated. This may be the main factor that led to the scarcity of the species fruiting body to emerge. 4 recommendations suggested that molecular approach are needed for future study for additional information in species identification.